Good morning, Mrs. Canesto. So we are the group 1, so our assigned topic is all about the policies and agrarian reform. So my assigned topic is to tackle first about the agrarian introduction and the land ownership in the Philippines under Spain. So agrarian reform is essentially the rectification of the whole system of agriculture, an important aspect of the Philippine economy because nearly half of the population is employed in the agriculture sector and most citizens live in the rural areas. So agrarian is centered on the relationship between production and distribution of land among farmers. It is also focused on the political and economic class character of the relations of production and distribution in farming and related enterprises and how this connect to the wider class structure. So agrarian can refer either narrowly to government-initiated or government-backed redistribution of agricultural land. See land reform broadly. So the importance of agrarian reform is the redistribution of lands regardless of crops, fruits, and to produce farmers regular framers that who are landless. And basically under the Spain of this year, agrarian reform is an enterprises which the Spain distribute lands to the Filipino farmers and to cultivate them as the pay tribute of the agricultural products. And next is to tackle the land ownership in the Philippines under Spain. So Spaniards Spain. So Spaniards in the Philippines brought the system of the Pueblo agriculture where rural communities often dispersed and scattered in nature were organized into a pueblo and given land to cultivate, but the families were not allowed to own their land. So the King of Spain owned the land and Filipinos were assigned to these lands to cultivate them, and they paid their colonies tributes to the Spanish authorities in the form of agricultural product. So in short, Filipino people is the same like as a tenants, in which the Spanish or the King of Spain provide a land areas for those Filipino farmers who are landless, in which they cultivate them, yet they also to pay tribute in order to form of agricultural products. And later on, through the law of Indies, the Spanish crown awarded tracts of land to religious orders, repartimientos for Spanish military as reward for their service, and Spanish encomienderos, those mandated managed the encomienda or lands given to them, where Filipinos work and paid their tributes to the encomendero. Encomendera as a land given to them, encomendero owner of the land, and the encomienda system was an unfair and abusive system as compressive and vandalas. So in the beginning of the 19th century, hacienda system was developed as a new form of ownership. In 1860s, Spain enacted a law ordering landholders to register their land holdings. In short, hacienda system was developed as a new form of ownership. So Filipinos were not given the right to own land and only worked them so that they might have share of the crops and pay tribute. As what I've said earlier, that Filipinos is the same like as a tenants, that they cannot own their own land, either their families, but they was provided by the King of Spain of land, but they need to cultivate and they need to plant any kinds of crops or fruits. And aside of cultivate them, they also to pay tribute as a form of agricultural products. It's either a crop or it's either a fruits. Then Filipino, that is called the compressive vandalas, that became the norm of the Filipino farmers working the land. And they were made to sell their products at a very low price to surrender their products to the encomenderos who resold this at a profit. Filipinos in the encomenda were also required to render services to their encomenderos that were unrelated to farmer. So aside as a farmer and to cultivate, they also to render any kind of services. Of what kind of services wanted to the Spaniards or the king of Spain. So from the encomenda system, the hacienda system developed in the beginning in the 19th century as the Spanish government implemented policies would fast-track the entry of the colony into the capitalist world. The economy was tied to the market as the Philippines became as export materials and importer of goods. That is the ownership in the 1860s Spain enacted a law ordering landholders to register their land holdings. That's why the import and exports of goods and products. Then, that is the agriculture export were demanded and the hacienda system was developed. Then this is the primary reason why revolts in the Philippines were often agrarian in nature. Before the colonization, Filipinos had communal ownership of land. The system introduced by the Spaniards became a bitter source of hatred, and this content for the Filipinos, religious orders, landowners in the Philippines also been main source of abuse and exploitation of the Filipinos. So more sila himong slave basta kay makultivate lang nila ang crops of fruits, and they usually do the cultivating, and after that they usually do the services, and it looks like or the same like as a slave, or this called as a slaves Filipino. So nana ka grabe ka abusive ang mga Spaniards before sa mga Filipino people. Then lastly, Filipino fought the Philippines Revolution. Afterwards, the revolution, the confluence of motivation, but the greatest desire of freedom would be the necessity of owning land. After the revolution, they fight. All the Filipino realized to fight the Philippines, and as this conducted a revolution, and from the freedom, the necessity of owning land, which is they need the kapayapaan, the freedom of the Filipinos, na makalingkawas sila as a slave, or nalingkawas sila sa mga abusive movements or actions through the Spaniards. However, the Philippine Republic was short-lived. The entrance of the Americans that would signal a new era of colonialism and imperialism in the Philippines, and that is the next topic about the land ownership of the Americans. And I think that would be all. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. Good day, Mrs. Onesto. I am Jacqueline Matulin Angkay, and I am about to report the post-war intervention toward agrarian reform. How can he stand his ground if he doesn't have any? So, for a long period of time, the agrarian system in the Philippines was being controlled by the large landlords. So, the small farmers in the Philippines were struggling jud ato nga time for the rights to land and other resources. So now, I will going to share with you the different administration on where they implemented different programs to help the farmers in the Philippines. Let us see if they successfully applied their implementation. So the first administration was the presidency of President Manuel Rojas. Republic Act number 34 was enacted to establish a 70-30 sharing arrangement between tenant and landlord, respectively, which reduced the interest of landowners' loans to tenants at 6% or less. So, the 70% mapunta na siya sa tenant or to the person who shoulder the expenses for planting, harvesting, and for the work of animals, while the 30% will go to the landlords. Kana siya if first-class land ang gamiton. Land whose normal production is over 40 cavans of palay per 1 cavans of seeds. For the second-class land, ang sharing is 75% for the tenant and 25% for the landowners, whose normal production is between 25 and 40 cavans per 25 and 40 cabans per 1 cavan of seeds. So for the third class land, 80% for the tenant and 20% for the land owner, whose normal production is less than 25 cabans of palay per 1 cabans of seeds. Less than 25 cabans of palay per 1 cabans of seeds. So, one of the most important effects of these amendments induces the tenant to work harder and more continuously because of the prospect of receiving a major part of his produce. So, President Rojas negotiated for the purchase of 8,000 hectares in Batangas owned by the Ayala Zubil family. These were sold to landless farmers. So namalit si Rojas og 8,000 hectares sa Batangas nga gipanag-iya sa Ayala Zubil family o gipanghatag niya sa mga landless farmers. But due to lack of support facilities, gipamaligya sa mga farmers ang hinatang gayuta ni Rojas to the land-owning class. This failure gave basis to doubt that real meaning of land reform, to the meaning of land reform program. Next is the administration of President Elpidio Quirino. Through Executive Order Number 355, the Land Settlement Development Corporation, LASIDECO, was established to accelerate and expand resettlement program for peasants. So, due to lack post-war resources, the program was unsuccessful gihapon because tungod pod atong kanang the Quirino's administration manggod was tainted by widespread graft and corruption because the 1949 election which he had won were among the most dishonest in the country's history. So na ato'y mga palusot dito and mga dishonesty nga nahitabo. The agency later on became the National Resettlement and Rehabilitation Administration or NARA. Then next is the administration of President Magsaysay. Republic Act number 119 or the Agricultural Tenancy Act was passed to govern the relationship between landholders and tenant farmers, protecting the tenurial rights of tenants and enforce tenancy practices. So through this law, the Court of Agricultural was created in 1955 to improve tenancy, security, fixed land, rentals, and tenanted farms, resolve land dispute filed by the landowners and peasant organizations. So the Agricultural Created Cooperative Financing Administration or ACCFA was also created mainly to provide warehouse facilities and assist farmers in marketing their products. So the administration this time spearheaded the establishment of the Agricultural and Industrial Bank to provide easier terms in applying for homestead and other farmlands. And the LASIDECO this time is the LASIDECO this time is NARA naman. So the NARA accelerated government resettlement program distribution of agricultural land to landless tenants and farmers. The NARA particularly aimed to convince members of the Hukbalahap movement to return to a peaceful life by giving them home lots and farmland settlement. So mauna ilahang kanang offer sa Hukbalahap movement. Hatagan sila home lots o farmland para makapuyo sila og malinawon. Para magpuyo sila og malinawon. So the next is the administration of President Diosdado Macapagal. So he was considered as the father of agrarian reform. Nga naman kaha. So it was during his term that the Agricultural Land Reform Code Republic Act number 3884 was enacted on August 8, 1963. This was considered to be the most comprehensive piece of agrarian reform legislation ever enacted in the country that time. This abolished shared tenancy in the Philippines and prescribed a program to convert tenant farmers to lessees and later on owner cultivators. It also aimed to free tenants from tenancy, emphasizes owner cultivatorship and farmer independence, equity, productivity, improvement, and public land distribution. So, nindot ihang pamalakad but kanang naagyapoy mga kanang issues ani. Ang issues ani kay kanang kuan sa panahon ni Diosdado Macapagal, daghag gihapon og issues kanang unsuccessful gihapon ang iyahang implementation towards the agrarian reform. Ang mga issues ani niya, issues and controversies, grafts and corruption, rise in consumer goods prices, peace and order issues. So mauna, unsuccessful gihapon ang pagdagan sa agrarian system sa Philippines. So, wrap up. So, the agrarian reform tries to change in order to secure and individual or corporate property rights that are critical in building a structure of financial motivation, speculation, and land-based activities. Pero sa tanang administration, none of what they promised really achieved. Wala dyan na-achieve nga kanang successful jud kaayo nga kanang implementation nga gihatag nila for the farmers. All are unsuccessful and failures. Nakatabang man but less percent ra ang natabang sa farmers. Kaya nga naman, kulang man og support services kay ang uban corrupt, wala nahimutang og tarong ang kwarta. And that would be all. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Our topic is about policies on agrarian reform. And my assigned topic is about the land ownership in the Philippines under the Americans. The Americans were aware that the main cause of social unrest in the Philippines was landlessness, and attempted to put an end to the deplorable conditions of the tenant farmers by passing several land policies to increase the small landholders and distribute ownership to a bigger number of Filipino tenants and farmers. There are four significant legislation enacted during the American period. First was Philippine Bill of 1902 set the ceilings on the hectareage of private individuals and corporations. This means that a private individual may own 16 hectares of land, while corporate holders, uh, corporate landholders may have 1,024 hectares. And Americans also given rights to own agricultural land in the country. The second one is Land Registration Act of 1902. Act number 496 provided for a comprehensive registration of land titles under the Torrens system. It is also to address the absence of earlier records of issues land titles and conduct accurate land surveys. The third one is the Public Land Act of 1903 introduced the homestead system in the Philippines. This means that allowing a tenant to enter into an agricultural business by acquiring a farm of at least 16 hectares. This program, however, was limited to areas in northern Luzon and Mindanao, where colonial penetration had been difficult for Americans. The last one is the Tenancy Act of 1933, Act number 4054 and 4113. It has regulated relationships between landowners and tenants of rice, 50-50 sharing and sugarcane lands. And that are the four legislation enacted during the American period. Land ownership did not improve during the American period. In fact, it even worsened because there are no limit to the size of land holdings people could possess, and accessibility of possession was limited to those who could afford to buy, register, and acquire fixed property titles. The Sakdal or Sakdalista uprising was a peasant rebellion in central Luzon that lasted for 2 days, May 2 to 3, 1935. It was easily crushed by government forces then, but this historical event tells of the social inequality even brought by issues in land ownership and tenancy in the country. The Filipino word sakdal means to accuse, which is the title of the newspaper held by Benigno Ramos. He relayed support from Manila and nearby provinces through the publication, which led to the establishment of the Partido Sakdalista in 1933. They demanded reforms from the government such as the abolition of taxes and equal or common ownership of land, among others. They also opposed the dominant nationalista party's acceptance of gradual independence from the United States, and instead demanded immediate severance of ties with America. And then let's move on to there are also let's move on the year during the years of Commonwealth government. And there are also five rather significant legislation enacted during Commonwealth period. First was 1935 Constitution, the promotion of social justice to ensure the well-being and economic security of all people should be the concern of the state. The second one was Commonwealth Act number 178, amendment to Rice Tenancy Act number 4045, November 13, 1936, provided for certain controls in the landlord-tenant relationships. The third one was National Rice and Corn Corporation or NARIC 1936 established the price of rice corn, thereby helped the poor tenants as well as consumers. The fourth one was the Commonwealth Act number 461, 1937, specified reasons for the dismissal of tenants and only the with the approval of the Tenancy Division of the Department of Justice. The last one was Rural Program Administration, created March 2, 1939, provided the purchase and lease of haciendas and their sale and lease to the tenants. Commonwealth Act number 441, enacted on June 3, 1939, created the National Settlement Administration with a capital stock of 20 million. During the years of Commonwealth government, the situation further worsened as peasant a pricing a pricing increase and landlord-tenant relationship became more and more desperate. The effort towards agrarian reform by Commonwealth also failed when it comes to budget allocation for the settlement program and widespread peasant uprising. And that would be all. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. This is Shanine Balamea, and today I'm going to tackle more about the agrarian reform under Marcos. So, President Marcos, as we all know, is the one who declared martial law in 1972, enabling him to essentially wipe out the landlord dominated Congress through his technocrats, and he was able to expand executive power to start fundamental restructuring of government, including the efforts in solving the deep structural problems of the countryside. So, we all know that President Marcos is the one who declared martial law, and uh, when we talk about martial law, the first thing that would pop up into our mind is that violence. It is violent. Because we all know that it is one of the darkest episode in the country's very recent past, and some may uploaded that Marcos was imposing such system for for us to be more disciplined, or for our fellow man in the past to be more disciplined, but uh, it's kind of more than that. It was very impressive at first, but on the latter part, it caused pain and trauma to our fellow men, because knowing the fact that they are being betrayed by our leader, which is Marcos, who is Marcos. So yes. So, the Presidential Decree number 27, or also known as the Code of Agrarian Reform of the Philippines. So, Presidential Decree number 27 became the core of agrarian reform during the Marcos regime. So, this shall apply to tenant farmers, to private agricultural land primarily devoted to rice and corn under a system of sharecrop or lease tenancy, whether classified as landed estate or not. So, for a long period of time, the agrarian system of the Philippines was being controlled by the large landlords. So, farmers in the past were struggling for their rights to land and other natural resources. So, this Presidential Decree number 27 uh, aims on helping the tenant farmers from the bondage of the soil. So, this presidential decree number 27, helps the farmer to formally start uh, farming or formally start planting rice and corn without uh, being controlled by large landlords, or whether in land. So the tenant farmer, whether in land classified as landed estate or not, shall be deemed owner of a portion constituting a family-size farm of 5 hectares if not irrigated and 3 hectares if irrigated. So, the Presidential Decree number 27 became the heart of Marcos reform. So, it provided for tenanted lands devoted to rice and corn to pass ownership to the tenants and lowered the ceilings for land holdings to 7 hectares or 5 to 3 hectares. So, yeah. In all cases, the landowner may retain an area or not of not more than 7 hectares if such landowners is cultivating such area or will not cultivate it. So the law stipulated to share tenants who worked from a land holding of over 7 hectares could purchase the land that they tilled, while share tenants on land less than 7 hectares would become leaseholders lang. So, for the purpose of determining the cost of the land to be transferred to the tenant farmer pursuant to this decree, the value of the land shall be equivalent to 2.5 times the average harvest of 3 normal crop years immediately preceding the promulgation of this decree. So the Agrarian Reform Program was designed to uplift the farmer from poverty and ignorance and to make them useful, dignified, to make them even more responsible, to make them even more progressive, and to become partners in nation building. So the government shall guarantee such amortization with shares of stock in government-owned and government-controlled corporations. No title of the land owned by the tenant farmers under the decree shall be actually issued to a tenant farmer unless and until the tenant farmer has become a full-fledged member of a duly recognized farmers cooperative. So it is self-explanatory. So the program was a package of services extended to farmers in the form of credit support, infrastructure, farm extension, legal assistance, electrification, and development of rural institutions. So the Department of Agrarian Reform, through its secretary, is hereby empowered to promulgate rules and regulations for the implementation of this decree. So the Department of Agrarian Reform will be empowered to promulgate rules and regulations for the implementation of this decree. So it goes beyond the question of land rights, and it is concerned with the total development of the the Department of Agrarian Reform is concerned with the total development of the farmer's economic, social, and political transformation, and it deals with the general agricultural practice like introducing crop rotation. So, yeah. Next is the Operation Land Transfer. Occupied by tenants of more than 7 hectares on rice and corn lands commenced and through legal compulsion and an improved delivery of support services to small farmers, agrarian reform seemed to be achievable. So next in line is Masagana 99. So farmers were able to borrow from banks and purchase 3-hectare plots of lands and agricultural inputs. Lands worked by wage labor were also exempt from the program, so the landed elite na siya guys, only had to evict their tenants and hired workers instead. So, Masagana 99 was launched on 1973 and as a program of survival to address the acute food shortages and later to increase rice production. So it also helps farmer nga di sila gutomon and then kana bitawng
mo increase ang production sa rice diri sa atong country. So in the first year, Masagana 99 was a huge success because of the prevailing political conditions, implementing actors to performed their mandated task. So as far as attaining self-sufficiency in rice is concerned, Masagana 99 was a huge success, Jude. So in fact, after only 2 years of implementation, the Philippines was able to attain sufficiency of in 1976 and may have exported rice. So because of this, Masagana 99 farmers are able to export rice, and they start to increase the rice production in our country. So landlessness increased, which made it all the more difficult for the program to succeed because landless peasants were excluded from the program. Many other methods were exploited by the elite to find a way to maintain their power and dominance, which were worsened by the corruption of Marcos and his cronies who were also involved in the agrarian sector. So, as what I've said earlier, in the first place, success pa jud kayo ang Masagana 99 because of the political conditions, because dagan kaig mga individuals or mga officials nga ning perform sa ilang mga mandated task. But as time goes by, ni worse bitaw siya tungod sa because of the corruption of Marcosad and his cronies. So by that, we can conclude that President Marcos' Agrarian Reform Program was labeled as revolutionary by some sectors because of two reasons. It was pursued under martial law and intended to make quick changes without going through legislative or technical processes. So, we all know jud baya nga once nga magbuhat jud ka og like law or something, you have to undergo kuan ka ng legislative or technical processes. So kani siya nga reform is wala siya nag-undergo og legislative or technical processes. And it was also the only law in the Philippines which ever done in handwriting. So imagine like kanang in handwriting, nakita dyan ako sa kuan sa Google bitaw nga gi-handwrite gid siya as in nya. It's kanang first time ko kita og kanang inato bitaw nga murag gi-handwrite nga kuan kasagaran baya kay murag i-type or something. So therefore, we can conclude that Marcos's agrarian reform is not that successful jud, though na siya advantage in the first place or ni-succeed siya in the first place, but as time passes by, as corruption are getting worse, so wala jud like kanang ni nagkagubot lang. So it's not a success for me. So that would be all. Thank you.
Right, good afternoon again, everyone. So now we are almost done with our discussion by the topic which is given to us last meeting, and it is all about the policies of agrarian reform. And in the first part of this video, Christine Joy already discussed to you what is an agrarian reform. And again, agrarian reform refers to the redistribution of land regardless of crops or fruits produced by farmers and regular farm workers who are landers. And now we are going to talk about the post-1986 agrarian reform, which you can see in the screen. So, land reform has long been a continuous issue rooted here in the Philippines. So, it started from the Spanish period down to the People Power Revolution that was happened in 1986. So, makaingon gyud tanon na ang kaning land reform issue here in the Philippines is very dugay na gyud siya, and it keeps on extending. So, on July 22, 1987, former President Corazon Aquino issued the Presidential Proclamation 131 and Executive Order 229, which outlined her land reform program. So si Corazon Aquino ani nga time is gi-envision niya ang agrarian and land reform as one of her legislative agenda. But then her background betrayed her, since kani si Corazon Aquino man good guys kay dato ni siya. Social class man ni si Corazon Aquino, and her family is the owner of Hacienda Luisita. So her land reform agenda receives a lot of criticism at that time. So gi-criticize pag-ayo si Corazon Aquino tungod kay dato man siya. And if hinumdum mo or nakadungog mo na grabe ang issue about aning Hacienda Luisita sa una. And ato pod nga time, if naka-familiar mo or nakadungog ba mo ron sa balita sa una, or nakabalo ba mo na naay Minjola massacre na nahitabo sa una. And tungod to siya kay nagprotesta ang mga farmers kay about lagi ato. And the march turned to be violent kay because nagpadala man og mga marine forces ang government ato, kay syempre if di ba na ay magprotesta naman jud ay mga police or unsa pa na din ha, basta mga alagad sa government. So naadyoy nasawi na 12 ka farmers, and there are also 19 nga na-injured. So mas ni worst pa noon ang situation, which lead to the resignation of some of the prominent person sa Aquino administration ato nga time. And by 1998, the Congress passed the Republic Act number 6657, or the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law, or CARL, so which introduced the program of the same name, the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program. And despite sa implementation sa CARP, Aquino was not spared. So bisan pa man nga nagpadayon ang issue regarding her and the Hacienda Luisita, so CARP enables the redistribution of agricultural lands to tenant farmers from landowners who were paid in exchange by the government through compensation, and allowed them to retain not more than 15 hectares. So bisan pa man nagpadayon ng issue guys, wala gihapon naapektuhan ang CARP. So napadayon gyapon ang distribution sa mga agricultural land to the landowners as long as wala lang nalapas og 5 hectares. So kuan guys, sorry. Okay, ako i-move gamay. Okay. So kaning CARP, ang goal gyud ani niya is ang pag-provide sa mga landowners and equality in terms of income and opportunities. It also empowered landowner beneficiaries to have equitable land ownership, and of course enhance the agricultural production and productivity, and provide to more agricultural workers, then put an end to conflicts regarding land ownership and by the government through compensation, and allowed them to retain not more than 15 hectares. So bisan pa man nagpadayon ng issue guys, wala gihapon naapektuhan ang CARP. So napadayon gyapon ang distribution sa mga agricultural land to the landowners as long as wala lang nalapas og 5 hectares. So kuan guys, sorry. Okay, ako i-move gamay. Okay. So kaning CARP, ang goal gyud ani niya is ang pag-provide sa mga landowners and equality in terms of income and opportunities. It also empowered landowner beneficiaries to have equitable land ownership and of course enhance the agricultural production and productivity and provide to more agricultural workers, then put an end to conflicts regarding land ownership. And during Aquino's administration, CARP accomplished about 22.5% of land distribution. While sa panahon ni um, President Fidel Ramos, CARP implementation was speeded, even though na his administration have had to face a lot of circumstances, and usa sa gi-consider nila as a major problem is ang lack of funds and support coming from the government by implementing the program. So, wait sa guys ha. Ako ang i-move gamay. Screen. Alright, okay. So, padayon ta. So, by 1996, DAR or the Department of Agrarian Reform distributed only 58.25% of the total target area to be covered by the program. And few months before ma-end ang term ni President Fidel Ramos, he signed the Republic Act number 8532 in 1998 to amend the CARP and extend the program into another 10 years despite nga nagkulang og support and financial funds. So kasagiingon pa nako ganina, ang kaning agrarian reform, it keeps on extending. So na-extend na po ni siya through they signed of President Ramos. So now let's move to CARPER and the future agrarian reform in the Philippines. And this agrarian reform in the Philippines, or CARP, expired in 2008, leaving 1.2 million farmers and beneficiaries, and there are also 1.6 million hectares of agricultural land to be distributed to farmers. And then, President Arroyo signed the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program extension in 2009 with reforms, or this is what we called as CARPER. So, kaning CARPER is to extend the agrarian reform ni siya for up to 5 more years, so that simply means nga this agrarian reform kay nagpadayon pagihapon. So CARPER distributed a total of 1 million hectares of land from 2009 to 2014 with 900,000 farmers beneficiaries and 25 years of land reform nga nagtotal of 500,000 hectares of land, which is undistributed na siya. So wala pa na siya na-distribute. So of course, the DENR and DAR mandated to fulfill the CARP and CARPER. Even they have combined their resources, they are incapable of achieving the goal of agrarian reform in the Philippines. So, nag-join force ni ang DENR o ang kaniang DAR sa pag-mandate para lang ma-fulfill ang CARP o magpadayon pa ni siya. So, the same problem have plagued its implementation. The government, until these two challenges are surmounted, genuine agrarian reform in the Philippines remain but a dream to Filipino farmers who have been fighting for centuries. So, until karon guys, makaingon gihapon ta na present gihapon ni ang kanina issue. But because of the pandemic, no, in our today's present state. So naglisod pa ang government, no, sa pag-focus ani kay ang gifokusan manggod karon is ang COVID pa. But hopefully guys, soon, di ba? Mahataga na unta og kanang rights ang atuang mga farmers nga makapag panag-iya o ilang kaugalingong yuta bitaw, because we all know na ang farmers is very important manggod nato. So, and also the agriculture, it's very important in the economy and in our country, and of course to us humans, because through agricultural products naatay gikaon, naatay mga resources, and of course ang farmers guys. So sa ako lang, no, in my opinion, siguro mas dapat kung after na aning COVID, mas dapat fokusan ang mga farmers nato, because luoy kaayo ni sila. And if wala na farmers, wala na say mag-uma nato, unsa man ang ato ang kanon, so mga kata sa lain na nasod, which is dugang-dugang lang pud siguro sa atong utang, no. That is just my opinion. And hopefully soon, if mawala na ning COVID, hunta mahatagan og pagtagad kung unsa man gani ang mga panginahanglan sa ato ang farmers. So that's it for our reporting, and thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you have learned something from the discussions.